Reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The PATRIOT Act is a bill that has been plagued with abuse since it was first passed, and today's rule is yet another example of short-circuiting the system that our founding fathers set up. If there was ever the need for close supervision and congressional oversight of a law, it is a law that discusses how and under what conditions a government can spy on its own citizens. But yet, after 10 years of public record, we all agree there are some clear sections of the law that can be improved. But instead of debating these sections of the law to better find that balance between protecting what makes it special to be Americans and protecting our national security, instead Republican leadership has decided to ram through this bill with as little debate as possible. Mr. Speaker, we spent an hour earlier discussing how we will spend 9.5 hours discussing the organizational aspects of the House committee structure, and yet for something that cuts to our core identity as Americans, we only have an hour under the rule and an hour under the bill to discuss it in its entirety. This bill would reauthorize 3 of the most troubling provisions in the PATRIOT Act. And again, instead of actually debating the merits of these provisions and coming up with solutions that both sides can agree on to protect what it means to be an American, Republican leadership has attempted first to force it through on the suspension calendar and now under a closed rule, the most restrictive kind of rule. In spite of the plethora of promises to change the culture of Congress, this bill looks like it's being done under old business. On such an important issue, one that affects our national security, our civil liberties of every American, that goes right to the heart of what it means to be American and our identity as citizens of this great republic, the Republican majority has reverted back to short-circuiting the system and closing down discussion. Just yesterday, they held the vote open for more than half an hour, pressuring members to switch votes. Thankfully, the effort failed to muster the majority, and that's why we're here before you today with an additional hour to discuss the PATRIOT Act. Woefully insufficient, but I think the American people can be grateful that members on both sides of the aisle stood up and said, at least let's have more discussion about this. Only after they failed to jam through the bill as a suspension bill did Republican leadership bring it up under a rule. The Judiciary Committee, which the Republicans argue has not had time to look at this or to consider this under the normal process, has actually already had several hearings in the past few weeks on other topics. Apparently, the topic of abortion was important enough to have a discussion of the Judiciary Committee, but not the topic of the security of the American people and our civil rights as Americans. So why can't the Judiciary Committee find the time to even hold a hearing to discuss an issue this important that cuts the very definition of what it means to be American? Even if a little more time is needed, a month, 2 months, why isn't there a 30-day extension, a 60-day extension before us instead of a 10-month extension? It should not be used as an excuse to prevent all proceedings from moving forward. Nearly to I'll yield for a moment.
I thank my friend for yielding, and I will explain why it is that we have more than a 30-day extension. As I said, with the controversies, the challenge, and the absolute humongous task that is faced, we know it takes a while, and to have that 10 months extension is essential for them to do their work. I thank my friend for yielding.
Reclaiming my time, I think there would be broader agreement if there was perhaps a 60-day extension and then perhaps a need for another 60-day extension if there was no legislative business completed. But putting it off 10 months or a year can actually give an excuse not to bring to the forefront these very important issues that need to be dealt with. This body can produce results. There has already been the single most significant bill was H.R. 2, the repeal of an entire body of health care law. And somehow there was the ability to bring that to the floor within days of the opening of the new Congress. You know, both parties want to ensure that the government has the tools we need to fight terrorism. And we can all agree that the PATRIOT Act has issues that need to be resolved. If we can move this bill through the regular order, I'm confident that the Judiciary Committee can make improvements that they've already discussed in prior sessions. In fact, just last year, the Judiciary Committee reported out by voice vote reform measures that would improve the PATRIOT Act and add real oversight. It's clear that there is bipartisan support to improve this bill. Even as we speak, the Senate is debating 3 different versions of the reauthorization bill. And yet here in the House, we have only this one, originally scheduled with hardly any debate, and now with a very closed structure and no ability for members of either party to offer amendments. Apart from its procedural flaws, the reauthorization fails to provide the administration the tools and support it truly needs. The administration, which does support reauthorizing the PATRIOT Act, has repeatedly asked for a real reauthorization rather than the short-term extensions that increase the uncertainty surrounding long-term planning, intelligence, and law enforcement as they carry out this mission. Instead of a patch that will get us through another few months at the expense of the civil liberties of the American people, we need the opportunity to truly work together to fix this bill. Specifically, this bill would reauthorize three provisions: Section 215, 206, and 6001 of the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act. Section 215 allows the government to capture any tangible thing that might be relevant to terrorist investigations. This includes your medical records, your diary, even what books you've checked out of the library, and what websites you visited. In the past, these orders were limited to narrow classes of business and records, but the specific facts pertain to any agent of a foreign power, and the PATRIOT Act has swept away these basic requirements. In fact, it was reported by a bookstore that the information regarding everybody who purchased biographical books about Osama bin Laden had been requested. The justification used for this provision is that the government needs to have the ability to protect our national security, and yet this goes against the basic constitutional notions of search and seizure. We ought to seriously consider making changes to this section instead of blindly giving the government the ability to spy on its citizens. Let me just give a few examples, and I think this will come as some surprise to many people, of the transgressions that have already occurred, the affronts to our civil liberties and freedoms as Americans that have already occurred under the PATRIOT Act. Perhaps some of us have taken Christmas vacations to Las Vegas. Well, there is a list of 300,000 people that visited Las Vegas in Christmas of 2003 that, according to an article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, said the casino operators said they turned over the names and other guest information on an estimated 270,000 visitors. Now, I think a lot of people don't expect that to happen when they visit Las Vegas. There needs to be an in place to ensure that when extreme measures are necessary that interfere with our privacy, it goes through the right channels. This particular incident, even the FBI conceded that the personal records had not borne out a particular threat. The PATRIOT Act has been used more than 150 times to secretly search individuals' homes, and 90% of those cases, 90%, have had nothing to do with terrorism. The PATRIOT Act was used against Brandon Mayfield, a Muslim American innocent of any crime, to tap his phone, seize his property, copy his computer files, spy on his children, take his DNA, all without his knowledge, Mr. Speaker. It's been used to coerce an Internet service provider to divulge information about web surfing and Internet activity, and then gagged that provider, preventing them from even saying that their information had been compromised. It's been used to charge, detain, and prosecute a Muslim student in Idaho for posting Internet website links to materials that were found objectionable by some, even though those same links were available on a U.S. government website. Mr. Speaker, part of what makes America special is the balance between our civil liberties and our rights as Americans and our national security. When so many members of Congress, so many Americans on both sides of the aisle, of all ideologies, feel that we can do better, I think we owe it to the people of this country to do better and have a better process as a Congress to improve the PATRIOT Act, to help protect our liberties and keep us safe over the long term. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California.